What if I told you the real reason avoidant people pull away has nothing to do with you and everything to do with what feels emotionally safe to them? There is something most people only understand after things have already started to fall apart. You might believe you understand avoidant individuals. You might think you know why they withdraw, why they go silent, or why they suddenly seem distant the moment things start to feel real or emotionally deep. But the truth is, most people don't see the full picture. What we're usually told about avoidant behavior only explains part of it. And a lot of what people assume about what these individuals want from love is simply inaccurate. If you don't understand what's really happening underneath, you end up repeating the same painful cycle again and again. You get close, they pull away, you feel anxious, the connection breaks down, and you're left trying to figure out what went wrong. But here is the part most people never hear. Avoidant individuals are not running from love itself. They are running from emotional experiences that don't feel safe to them. That difference changes everything. And one of the biggest reasons relationships with avoidant partners fail is actually quite simple. Most people don't recognize the qualities that actually make an avoidant person feel safe and drawn in, not the qualities we assume matter, not the things we try so hard to give them. I'm talking about something much rarer. Traits that are calm, steady, and grounded enough to make an avoidant person pause and think, "This feels different." If you've ever watched someone slowly drift away from you, if you've ever been told you're too emotional or too intense, if you've ever felt like you're never quite enough no matter how much you try, or if you've ever questioned your own worth because someone kept slipping in and out of reach, then this matters deeply. Because once you understand what avoidant people actually respond to, everything shifts. Your self-worth shifts, your relationships shift, even the way you carry yourself changes. So stay with this for a moment, because what you're about to understand can completely change how you see these dynamics. When we talk about staying emotionally grounded during uncertainty, we are not talking about pretending you don't care. We are not talking about suppressing your needs, or walking on eggshells, or hiding your emotions just to appear calm. We are talking about something far more powerful. It is the ability to stay connected to yourself, even when someone else disconnects from you. And that is something avoidant individuals notice immediately, because most people collapse emotionally the moment distance appears. That is human nature. When someone you care about pulls back, your mind starts scanning for answers. You replay conversations, you overthink messages, you question your tone, your actions, your worth. Slowly, their distance starts to feel like evidence that something is wrong with you. But that is where old emotional wounds distort reality. They whisper that you are too much, or not enough, or somehow responsible for the distance. Being grounded means not letting that internal panic take control. It means pausing before reacting. It means recognizing the difference between someone pulling away because of their own emotional wiring and someone pulling away because you are not enough. Avoidant individuals are often conditioned to expect emotional chaos when distance appears. In their experience, closeness has often come with pressure, emotional intensity, and overwhelm. So when they feel themselves needing space, they brace for the reaction they expect from others. They expect panic, they expect questions, they expect emotional pursuit, they expect pressure. But when that reaction doesn't come, something unexpected happens. When you stay calm, steady, and rooted in yourself, it disrupts everything they are used to. Your grounded presence becomes the first experience they've had where someone doesn't turn their emotional needs into a threat or burden. They pull away expecting you to chase. Instead, you remain centered, not cold, not distant, not punishing, just steady, just present, just quietly confident in a way that says, "I'm okay, even if you need space. I'm not going to fall apart." And that is extremely rare. Most people respond to distance with anxiety. They chase. They explain, they overextend, they try to repair something immediately, even when nothing has actually broken. They attempt to force closeness back into place. But a grounded person creates a completely different emotional atmosphere, one that feels safe instead of suffocating. This kind of groundedness is not passivity. It is not ignoring your needs or allowing someone to walk over you. It is emotional regulation. It is maturity. It is the ability to feel fear, confusion, or frustration without letting those emotions control your behavior. It is the understanding that your reactions belong to you, not them. And that emotional stability sends a very clear signal to an avoidant person: you are not dangerous. Because in their internal world, emotional intensity often equals threat. Emotional spiraling feels like pressure. Emotional overreaction feels like danger. But a grounded person doesn't demand reassurance in the moment. They don't panic when space appears. They don't turn uncertainty into crisis. They stay steady enough that the other person can finally breathe. And that is exactly what avoidant individuals are often drawn to, even if they cannot explain it. Someone who does not collapse when distance appears. Someone who does not chase out of fear. Someone who can remain present without overwhelming them. Someone who can hold emotional space without adding emotional weight. Think back to a moment when someone you cared about pulled away. Maybe fear took over. Maybe you sent another message. Maybe you over-explained, apologized unnecessarily, or tried to fix the distance immediately. And the more you chased, the further they moved. Not because you lacked value, and not because you made a mistake, but because your reaction reinforced a belief they already carry, that closeness leads to pressure, and pressure leads to danger. Now imagine a different response. You still feel the fear because you are human, but you don't act from it. You give space without losing yourself. You don't punish, panic, or force connection. You remain steady, open, and warm. That kind of emotional steadiness can be deeply disorienting in the best way for an avoidant person. It challenges their internal model of relationships. When they pull back and nothing explodes, when you stay composed instead of reacting, it creates a crack in the emotional defenses they've built over time. That is what groundedness does. It communicates safety. And emotional safety is often the one thing avoidant individuals have never learned how to ask for, even though they deeply need it. When you stay centered, they begin to realize something new. Closeness doesn't have to feel overwhelming. Connection doesn't have to feel like chaos. Intimacy doesn't automatically lead to loss of self. They start to see that being close can still feel safe. And that realization changes everything. If you want, send the next part and I'll keep the same tone and structure consistent all the way through. You show them, through your behavior, that their distance does not break you. You show them that emotions don't have to turn into chaos. You show them that closeness doesn't automatically trigger panic, pressure, or survival mode. And in that space, something important begins to form. Trust. Not the kind of trust built on words, but the kind that is felt slowly over time. The kind that becomes the foundation for everything that follows. There is something deeply powerful about a person who can hold their emotional space without punishing the other person, without chasing them down, and without trying to pull them back before they are ready. That kind of presence is rare. Most people tend to fall into two extremes. They either cling tightly out of fear, or they shut down completely to protect themselves. One overwhelms the connection with anxiety and emotional urgency. The other withdraws so far inward that the relationship loses warmth and contact. But the rare person who stays steady in the middle, who remains connected without chasing and grounded without becoming cold, becomes unforgettable to someone with avoidant patterns. Because avoidant individuals are used to extremes. When they pull away, they are often expecting a reaction. They expect anger, they expect guilt, they expect emotional overwhelm, they expect silent punishment or pressure to show up differently. Many of them have spent their lives bracing for consequences whenever they create distance. Every step forward or backward in closeness has often come with emotional intensity from others, something they felt responsible for but unable to carry. So they learn to protect themselves by stepping back first. But everything changes when they meet someone who doesn't react from those extremes. Someone who stays balanced. Someone who doesn't collapse. Someone who doesn't chase. Someone who doesn't withdraw warmth as punishment. Instead, they encounter calm presence. They take a step back, and instead of pressure, they feel steadiness from you. You don't crowd them. You don't disappear. You don't make them feel guilty for needing space. You don't turn their distance into a problem that must be fixed immediately. You remain centered. You remain warm. You remain open. And that creates something they rarely experience: relief. For once, they are not responsible for managing someone else's emotional reaction. They are not carrying the weight of disappointing you. They are not feeling trapped by the expectation that they must respond in a certain way to keep the relationship stable. Instead, what they feel is respect. And that sense of respect is deeply regulating for them, almost like emotional oxygen. When you give them space without withdrawing your presence entirely, the message you are sending is simple. I'm here and I'm okay. That message reaches the parts of them that are afraid of being overwhelmed or emotionally consumed. It removes the fear that closeness will erase their autonomy. It replaces that fear with something new, choice. And choice is essential for avoidant individuals. They need to feel that connection is something they can move toward freely, not something being pushed onto them. When you hold your own space with confidence, you create room for them to approach you on their own terms. This is where many people misunderstand the process. They assume that giving space means disappearing, going cold, acting detached, or pretending not to care. But that is not true space. That is emotional withdrawal, and avoidant individuals feel the difference very clearly. When you go cold, they feel judged. When you go silent, they feel punished. When you remove warmth, they feel rejected. And all of it reinforces the same belief they already carry, that it is safer not to depend on anyone. Real emotional space looks completely different. It means staying emotionally available without pressure. It means keeping your warmth without chasing. It means not over-explaining or trying to fix discomfort just to ease uncertainty. It means staying yourself while allowing the other person to move at their own rhythm. You continue living your life. You remain grounded in your self-worth. You do not allow someone else's closeness or distance to define your emotional stability. And over time, that steadiness becomes something they can rely on, like a lighthouse that doesn't move, even when the waters around it do. Something they can return to when they are ready, without fear of judgment or emotional consequence. And you should never underestimate how powerful that really is. Avoidant individuals rarely have what they would experience as a safe place to land emotionally. Most of the time, they are only used to two kinds of responses. Either their need for space is taken as rejection or personal attack, or it is met with pressure, questions, emotional intensity, and a heavy need for reassurance. A person who stays centered in themselves is extremely rare. Someone who can respect an avoidant rhythm while still maintaining their own emotional balance is even rarer. And because it is so uncommon, it immediately stands out to them. Here is what matters most. A person who can hold their own emotional space is operating from security, not fear. They are not trying to control the relationship. They are not clinging for reassurance. They are not depending on constant closeness to feel stable. They understand who they are. They understand that a pause in connection is not the same as rejection. They understand that someone needing space does not mean the relationship is collapsing. And that kind of inner certainty is deeply calming for an avoidant person, because it removes the pressure of having to manage someone else's emotional reaction. It teaches them something they may have never truly experienced before. That connection does not have to feel like a struggle for control. It does not have to turn into pursuit and withdrawal. It does not have to become a battle of emotional survival. It can simply be two people showing up as themselves, communicating honestly, and giving each other room to breathe. That kind of dynamic can be deeply regulating for avoidant individuals. It reshapes how they experience intimacy. Instead of closeness feeling threatening or overwhelming, it begins to feel more manageable, more predictable, and more safe. At the same time, something important shifts within you. When you learn to respond this way, you stop living in constant emotional reaction. You stop trying to fix every uncomfortable feeling immediately. You stop abandoning your own center just to keep the connection alive. You start trusting your ability to handle uncertainty. You start valuing emotional calm as something worth protecting. And that creates a quiet form of strength that other people can sense even without words. They notice your steadiness. They notice that you are not forcing outcomes. They notice that you are not filling silence with panic, over-explaining, or emotional urgency. They notice that you are not turning their need for space into a crisis. And that kind of presence becomes something almost magnetic. Not because it pressures them, but because it removes pressure from them. You are no longer someone they have to manage emotionally. You become someone they can simply be around without feeling overwhelmed or responsible. You become someone they can breathe with. Someone they can return to without fear. Someone whose presence feels like emotional freedom instead of emotional obligation. The ability to hold your space without punishing, pressuring, or chasing someone is one of the highest forms of emotional maturity. It shows that you can regulate yourself. It shows that you can see another person as separate from your emotional triggers. It shows that you can stay grounded even when uncertainty shows up. And avoidant individuals value this more than they can usually articulate, because it gives them something they rarely experience, a sense of safety with another person. And safety is always the first doorway to real closeness. When I say avoidant people are drawn to those whose self-worth is not dependent on their behavior, I am pointing to something deeper than simple confidence. I am talking about the person who does not lose their emotional center when someone becomes distant, quiet, or inconsistent. That kind of stability can feel almost disorienting at first for an avoidant person, because they are often used to being the emotional trigger point in relationships. They are used to others reacting strongly to their distance. Panic, fear, anger, guilt, overthinking, emotional collapse. People often tie their sense of worth to the avoidant person's attention. So when that attention shifts, everything inside them becomes unstable. But when an avoidant meets someone who does not collapse, does not overreact, and does not turn distance into a story about their own value, it interrupts a familiar emotional pattern. It breaks the script they have learned to expect. They expect you to take it personally. They expect you to assume rejection. They expect you to spiral. But the person who knows their worth does not do that. They understand something essential that many people never fully learn. Another person's behavior is information about their internal state, not a measurement of your value. And that understanding is deeply grounding for someone who has always feared that closeness will eventually become overwhelming. When they pull away and you remain steady, you communicate something powerful without words. You show them you are not depending on their approval to stay balanced. You show them you are not placing emotional responsibility on their shoulders. You show them you are not expecting them to manage your inner world. And that is profoundly relieving for an avoidant person, because one of their deepest fears is disappointing someone who is emotionally dependent on them. They do not want to hurt others. They do not want to fail others. They do not want to feel responsible for someone else's emotional collapse. When that pressure becomes too heavy, they retreat. But a self-assured person changes the entire emotional equation. You become someone they respect because you respect yourself. You become someone they can trust because you are not using the relationship to fill an internal void. You become someone they can approach without fear because you are not making them responsible for your emotional stability. That kind of energy is rare, not coldness, not pride, but genuine inner strength. The kind of strength that says, I know who I am, I know what I deserve, I want connection, but I don't need you to be perfect in order for me to be okay. That is powerful because avoidant individuals are not searching for perfection. They are searching for safety. They want someone who remains steady, even when intimacy becomes uncomfortable. When your self-worth does not shift with their movements, you communicate something without needing to say it directly. I choose you, but I do not lose myself for you. And that message changes everything. It allows closeness to stop feeling like a demand. It removes the sense that your presence requires them to surrender their autonomy. And in that space, real connection finally has room to begin. I am not here to rush your process. I am not here to fix you. I am not your repair project, and I don't see you as something that is broken. And that kind of acceptance is rare. For someone with avoidant patterns, it is felt deeply in the body. Their nervous system begins to settle in a way it is not used to. The constant anticipation fades. They stop bracing for emotional pressure. They stop preparing for conversations that feel like traps. They stop expecting someone to push past their boundaries or force emotional depth before they are ready. For the first time, they can simply exist without feeling pulled into intensity they cannot handle in that moment. They can breathe without pressure. It is not that avoidant individuals do not want closeness. It is not that they do not want intimacy or emotional depth. They do, very much so. But they need it to unfold at a pace their system can tolerate. They need time to adjust, time to feel safe, time to open without feeling overwhelmed. They want connection that is chosen, not forced, something that develops through safety, not urgency. Most people misunderstand this pacing. They interpret it as emotional distance or lack of interest. But in reality, it is not a lack of feeling. It is emotional timing. When you allow someone to move at their own rhythm, something very different begins to happen. They open up more naturally. They share without resistance. They express emotions they would normally hold back if they felt pressured. And the key difference is this: The expression comes from them, not from force. Choice is what makes intimacy possible for someone with avoidant tendencies. When closeness is something they can step into freely rather than something demanded from them, their entire emotional experience shifts. They become more present, more honest, more connected. It is also important to understand how often avoidant individuals have been judged throughout their lives. Many have been told they are too distant, too private, too slow, too independent, too difficult to understand, or too emotionally closed. Over time, they begin to expect correction everywhere they go. So when they finally meet someone who is not trying to fix them or reshape them, something in them relaxes. They stop feeling like they are under emotional evaluation. They stop feeling like they need to defend who they are. You are no longer experienced as a threat to their independence. You become someone who understands their rhythm instead of trying to override it, and here is what many people miss completely. Avoidant individuals often crave emotional safety even more than they crave closeness itself. And acceptance is safety. Real acceptance does not demand performance. It does not force emotional exposure. It does not rush someone into vulnerability before they are ready for it. It simply says, I see you as you are. I am not here to control your process. I am here for connection, not correction. When that is felt, something softens. They stop hiding as much. They stop holding everything back. They stop preparing for the moment they will disappoint you. And instead, they begin to show parts of themselves that rarely come forward in other relationships. Not because they are being pushed into it, but because they finally feel safe enough for it to emerge on its own. And this is where the paradox appears. The more you try to fix or change an avoidant person, the more they retreat. But the more you allow them to be as they are, the more they begin to open. Pressure creates distance. Acceptance creates connection. Trying to decode them makes them guarded. Letting them be makes them visible. Trying to shape their emotions shuts them down. Respecting their pace builds trust. Avoidant individuals are highly sensitive to whether they are being treated as a project or as a whole person. They can feel the difference immediately. And when they feel fully accepted, something changes in the depth of their emotional response. Because acceptance is what reaches them first. It is what allows them to stay. And over time, it becomes the reason they choose closeness instead of running from it.